It's a liability of being unusually tall.
How many children have to die for you to be satisfied?
You deny the accusation that you greenlit genocide.
I absolutely deny.
Okay. Genesis is not just the first book of the Bible. It's this giant medical records system.
I agree with that. But can you answer my question?
Russian misinformation and propaganda attempt here in the United States.
Don't go to sleep on us over there, and I'm going to ask you a question. Right now, we're printing or borrowing $80,000 per second. We have 12 CIA bases in Ukraine.
CIA bases? I'll defer that to them $4 billion or so that we're asking for new child care facilities. And
to me, this is a blank check for a war that, without any clearly defined goals, will be endless.
In effect, the Department of Defense had to follow the law and submit this level of funding to the Congress. I expect we will stand in recess for a moment. We will resume. Senator, it's a liability of being unusually tall.
I'm pleased to be joined for the first time by our outstanding Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown. And I'm also glad to be back with Undersecretary of Defense Mike McCord, the Department's Comptroller.
Case stands at ease until the Capitol Police restore order. The committee will be in order. Secretary Austin.
First, even as our budget request...
The committee stands at recess until the Capitol Police can restore order.
Enough is enough. How many children have to die? How many children have to die for you to be satisfied? Enough killing my people. Enough. Stop bombing Gaza. Stop funding Israel. Stop funding
Israel. The committee is in recess. We are I would direct the Capitol Police to remove the demonstrators.
We have plenty of money for war, and we seemingly have no money for the people. No more weapons. Israel. No more weapons for Israel.
Mr. Secretary, you're recognized. In fact, CIA Director Burns recently stated, "No one is watching U.S. support for Ukraine more closely than Chinese leaders. One of the surest ways to rekindle Chinese perceptions of American fecklessness and stroke Chinese aggressiveness would be to abandon support for Ukraine." Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
I do, Chairman. I think we would ask that Congress pass a supplemental as soon as possible because Ukraine matters. And the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine will have global implications for our national security as well. So, and we take a look at what Ukraine has done with the support that we provided them, Chairman. It's been quite remarkable. You know, not only have they stopped a much superior force in terms of quality of equipment and numbers, they've taken back some 50% of the ground that the Russians initially occupied. And so they're not asking for someone to fight the fight for them. They're asking for the means to sustain their efforts. And without security assistance, they won't be able to resupply the much-needed air defense interceptors and air defense systems that they need to protect their skies and protect their people. And so we would see things begin to atrophy in a very meaningful way in a short period of time. And so I think it's really important that we pass this, that Congress pass this legislation as quickly as possible.
Did a genocide occur around the Gaza region and around the Gaza-Israeli border on October 7 of last year?
What we witnessed on October 7th, Senator, was a horrific terrorist attack by Hamas.
Well, was it a genocide?
Well,
well, let me be more specific. When non-combatant Israelis were killed, when their families were burned alive, was that a genocide?
Well, again, Israel suffered a terrific blow when.
Well, okay, so you're not willing to call it a genocide? Was it a war crime?
It certainly is a war crime. Yes.
Last week, and thank you for taking time to talk with me last week, but one of the things we saw last week was a CBS News investigation, which was the first public report that pointed to evidence of Russia's responsibility in the anomalous health incidents, also known as Havana syndrome. Our office has been in touch with victims almost since the first reporting of those incidents, and what we've heard from a number of those victims is that they believed that there was an adversary who was involved in those incidents. So can you tell me, in light of the reports, do you believe that the intelligence community should take another look at its assessment? And you have oversight over two intelligence agencies, the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency. Have you encouraged them to take another look at the reports and provided any resources towards that action?
Let me just say that I take the health and well-being of the force extremely seriously. I've spoken to leaders in the intelligence community and addressed this issue with them. They have assured me that they will continue to address and investigate any new evidence that presents itself, and they will continue to assess. The intelligence agencies that are a part of the Department of Defense will continue to support that overall effort. But yes, to answer your question.
Secretary Austin and Chairman Brown, do you agree with the Commissioner's statement that, quote, the nuclear force modernization programs of record are absolutely essential, although not sufficient, to meet the new threats posed by Russia and China, and that the elements of the program of record should be completed on time, expedited wherever possible, and expanded as needed?
Thank you, Senator, and thanks for your sustained support for our efforts to modernize our nuclear triad. We agree with the Strategic Posture Commission that U.S. deterrence remains sound.
Well, thank you, Senator Fisher. I had the real pleasure to have the commission come to my office and sit down and brief me here about 6 weeks ago. And I do agree with their assessment that our nuclear modernization is necessary but not sufficient.
With the National Security Supplemental stalled in the House, can you speak to how the lack of funding impacts our strategic posture in the Pacific? And what are we losing in the region by failing to get the Senate-passed bill to the President?
Well, as you know, Senator, this supplemental not only provides us the ability to provide security assistance to Ukraine, but also our partners in in the Indo-Pacific, specifically Taiwan. And so there are provisions in there in this supplemental request to continue to help Taiwan attain the capabilities to be able to defend itself. And so I think it's for that reason, it's really important to make sure that we continue to press forward and get the supplemental across the goal line.
I want to address what the protesters raised earlier. Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza?
Senator Cotton, we don't have any evidence of genocide being created.
So that's a no. Israel's not committing genocide in Gaza.
We don't have evidence of that, to
Thank
my
you.
knowledge. Yeah.
Better than Director Burns and Director Haynes did last month at the Intelligence Committee when they dodged that question. You stand accused by those protesters of greenlighting genocide. Would you like to respond to that accusation?
What I would say, Senator Cotton, from the very beginning is that we committed to help assist Israel in defending its territory and its people by providing security assistance. And I would remind everybody that, what happened on October 7th was absolutely horrible. Numbers of Israeli citizens killed, and then a couple of hundred Israeli citizens taken hostage.
American citizens as well.
American citizens as well.
So you deny the accusation that you greenlit genocide?
I absolutely deny.
Okay. For the record, I don't think Israel's committing genocide. I don't believe you greenlit genocide either. Just for those listening at home, Genesis is not just the first book of the Bible. It's this giant medical records system that now catches everything that's ever happened to you. So, every drill sergeant accuses recruits of lying to their recruiters so they can get into the service. But now Genesis catches all that. So if you broke your arm when you were 12 playing Pee Wee football, Genesis knows it. If you were prescribed an SSRI because you were depressed when you were 13 because your parents were getting a bad divorce, Genesis knows it. And you got to go through a whole lot of rigmarole to get a waiver. Now look, we can't have psychotics joining the military, but if a kid was on an SSRI when he's 13, does that really matter? Does it really matter? If he broke his arm when he was 13, he can't have a degenerate bone condition, but he broke his arm. And I know you'll say, because I've heard it before, that there's waiver approvals here. It takes a long time. And like if you're like a super gung-ho Captain America kid who wants to serve above everything else, you'll wait that time. But if it's going to take 120 or 150 days to join when you get a job at Amazon for $20 or $25 an hour, you're going to lose those people. I think you really need to look at the way Genesis works and the approval authority. And even if you have approval authority, whether it's an E8 out on the front lines at a mall or a lieutenant colonel at the headquarters, you're counting on them to take what they might see as some serious personal risk that doesn't have a lot of reward. That's why I think this has to be written into policy. My time is over, but I do think this is a serious question for all the services, and that I'd encourage you to look at it and take action sooner rather than later.
I don't disagree with you, Senator. I've been a recruiter, and I know how important this is to recruiters. And so what we need to continue to do is upgrade what requires a waiver and make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide enough medical professionals to be able to shorten the time that it takes to get that waiver. And so I think there are a number of things that we can do and should do, and we are doing some of those things. And we'll continue to press on this to shorten the time that it takes for recruiters to get these packets through.
How does the department ensure that infrastructure maintenance and modernization needs are met if there are multiple critical projects in Hawaii and throughout the region that are not being funded in the president's budget?
Well, we have, as you know, Senator, invested a lot into infrastructure throughout the region. And the PDI, Admiral Aquilino's request for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative this year is some $9.9 billion, and it includes infrastructure projects. And that's on top of the $20 billion that we've requested over the last couple of years in support of the PDI. So we continue to invest in this, and again, in terms of specific projects, the services will have to we'll have to continue to rank order what their priorities are based upon what their specific budget, what's available in their budget. But this is very important to us, and something that we'll continue to work on.
General Brown, the B-21 Raider and the next-gen air dominance platform will be critical in a fight against a near-peer adversary. Can you briefly share why these platforms are so essential to the joint force when it comes to fighting a capable enemy in a contested environment?
Well, we have an advancing threat. And if you think about the areas we've been operating in the course of the past several decades, we did not have an advanced threat. It was mostly violent extremists or other countries without advanced threats. What I see going forward is that with that advancing threat, we have to modernize and bring in capabilities that will not only match that threat, but exceed that threat and stay ahead of the threat. And that's why these particular platforms are so important.
Cindy McCain predicts that there will be a famine, a mass famine in Gaza. Secretary Austin, if that were to occur, if women and children who are already dying but start to die in great numbers because of lack of access to food or medicine, will that improve, or will that de-escalate the violence in the region, or will that accelerate violence in the region?
It will accelerate violence, and it will have the effect of ensuring that there's a long-term conflict because of, the Palestinian people have been disadvantaged to such a great degree. This doesn't have to happen. I think to your point, I think we should continue to do everything we can, and we are doing this to encourage the Israelis to provide humanitarian assistance, to open up more land routes, and to separate the Palestinian people from Hamas. Failure to do so, I think, would just create more terrorism.
Is 3% of GDP for our Department of Defense what we need during these very dangerous times?
No, we are, again, we linked our request to our strategy, and again, I think we had to make some tough choices, as I said earlier.
General, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Secretary. General, in your personal opinion, do you think that below 3% of GDP spending is what we need to meet these dangerous times, which we all agree are dangerous times?
Well, Senator, what I really believe on this is that we got to get a budget on time. For the past 15 years, we've been.
I agree with that.
We've had 5 years in continuing resolutions, and getting budgets on time actually impacts our buying power.
I agree with that. But can you answer my question? 3% of GDP. It's a pretty easy answer. The answer is no, right?
Well, Senator, as a warfighter, I don't think.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit this chart for the record.
Today, Chairman McCall and Chairman Turner in the House have both acknowledged a very sophisticated and concentrated Russian misinformation and propaganda attempt here in the United States to affect our public policy toward Ukraine. And indeed, both of them acknowledge that this has up to and including members of Congress. Do you see, Mr. Secretary, a danger to this country from this kind of concerted, conscious misinformation campaign on the part of the Russians?
Absolutely, Senator, and that danger increases on a daily basis. And to your point, it is sophisticated to the degree that people don't know that where the information's coming from and how Russia is doing these kinds of things. But again, there is a danger. Yeah.
That I continue to be concerned, and your combatant commanders are sounding the alarm about the Air Force continually not only eliminating legacy and current ISR assets, but now future ISR assets, with the hope that somehow low Earth orbiting satellites are going to solve the day. And I know you'll say, because we always hear, well, the combatant commanders never have enough ISR. They'll always say they don't have enough, but their concern is escalating along with the deterioration of our airborne ISR assets. I know about the priorities, and we need to do more. But could General Brown, maybe now that you have this broader responsibility than just the Air Force, maybe you could speak to that a little bit for me and help me feel better about it. And again, we can talk about it in more detail later.
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question, and I'll just tell you, based on experience, having been a deputy commander at a combatant command, air component commander, as well as a service chief, and now as a chairman, I do think about all the capabilities that we have, and ISR is one of those. And I will just say it's one of the more contentious issues that we have across the joint force. The things we're going to have to continue to do is not only look at the ISR that we do have to keep that moving, but at the same time look at opportunities, particularly, and you mentioned space-based capabilities. That's going to give us access into areas we can't get with some of the ISR that we have today. And so it's the combination of things, how we work together with the joint force, and this is an area that I am focused on with the joint chiefs and the combatant commands, to ensure that we're making best use of the resources that we do have, the capabilities in ISR, but I'd also say all the other capabilities that we provide for the joint force, and how we balance that out to make sure we're putting it in the right place at the right time to provide those capabilities. And so I'm having pretty deep conversations with the combatant commanders and with the joint chiefs on these very topics about how do we ensure that we are identifying the areas like ISR that we need to continue to resource, and how we best do that across the service and across the joint force.
Do you think an attack on Rafah that kills another 30,000 civilians would enhance either U.S. or Israeli security?
Thanks, Senator. There's no question that there have been far too many civilian casualties in this conflict, far too many. And what we continue to emphasize to the Israelis is that, the civilians in that battle space need to be not only evacuated, but properly taken care of once they're evacuated out of that battle space before anything is contemplated. And this is a point that I have stressed with my counterpart on a number of occasions. Just recently, it's yesterday. And again, it cannot be going forward what we've seen in the past in terms of the type of activities that we've seen in Gaza City and in Khan Yunis. Far too many civilians have been killed as a result of combat operations, and they need to get civilians out of that battle space around Rafah.
All right.
We watch what China's doing in Latin America. We watch what Russia's doing. We watch what Iran's doing. We know we have a Chinese spy station in Cuba. I've talked to Chairman Brown, Secretary Kendall, General Richardson about the importance of Homestead Air Force Base as from a standpoint of power projection and the need to have a flying mission. And I think all of them have agreed the importance of Homestead. So, Secretary Austin, do you believe that Homestead's important for power projection to Latin America, and should we have a flying mission there, and will we get a flying mission there?
Homestead Air Reserve Base is strategically located, and it provides valuable contributions to our efforts in the Southcom AOR. We continue to be grateful for your support for Homestead. I know that there's been questions about whether or not we're going to close Homestead, and I can tell you that that's not under consideration right now. So.
Right. Number two, China. China is elected to be our enemy. No ifs, ands, buts about it. We finally got through the NDA elimination, the federal government's ability to buy Chinese drones, but I don't personally understand how the Department of Defense would ever buy anything made in China. Specifically, Secretary Austin, do you believe that we ought to be buying Chinese LiDAR systems to use on our vehicles, or Chinese computers which are connected to our top secret networks?
I do not, and I also we will work hard and are working hard to make sure that our supply chains are not vulnerable to manipulation by adversaries. So it's important to us to make sure that we don't have elements from our adversaries included in our weapon systems and repair parts and you name it. So this is something that we pay very, very close attention to.
With this in mind, how can active duty, reserve, and guard components best prepare for CCA integration and training, given the near-term acquisition of these uncrewed autonomous systems that we're going to see in the near future. Secretary Austin, if you'd answer first, please.
Well, as you would imagine, Senator, I remain focused on making sure that we have the right mix of capabilities to execute our strategy. And I will just speak to the point that the CCA capability is really, really important, and it will ensure that we maintain a competitive edge in the future. And this is something that our Air Force has been working on for quite some time. And we're asking to invest in this, continue to invest in this budget. But your specific question about the training of reserve pilots, perhaps I'll let the chairman speak to that because he is a pretty good F-16 pilot and understands that the training requirements very, very well. But I would just emphasize that this is a tremendous capability. We're investing in the right things, and the total force at some point needs to have that capability. So,
thank you, General Brown.
Well, Senator Peters, thanks for the question. And I think about the joint force as a joint warfighter. I often think and address the total force, and that's active guard, reserve, and our civilians. And in my role as my previous role as the Air Force chief, as we started the path on collaborative combat aircraft, we looked at it from a total force perspective and where we'd apply that capability to make sure it is in all three components across the United States Air Force. I would also add, as we go down the path of uncrewed systems, not only in the air but maritime and other areas, how we leverage that capability with all aspects of our force will be most important to ensure we're able to have the full capability, not only from our active force but also from our Guard and Reserve as well.
Don't go to sleep on us over there, and I'm going to ask you a question. It's my understanding, the work that we've done, my staff, we have spent $300 billion since 2014 in Ukraine. Does that sound about right to you? I know that's before your time.
That does sound high to me. We did about $300 million a year for Ukraine for a number of years, and then just in the last 2 years we've done about 40. So if you're talking whole of government, it might be. I would have to check, but for DoD that does sound high.
Yeah. Well, my staff looked into it. About $300 billion, their best guesstimate. Right now we're printing or borrowing $80,000 per second, 4.6 million a minute. We can't sustain that much longer. We got to find best ways to spend our money. The DOD inspector general has said that there's 50 criminal investigations going on right now from money sent to Ukraine. By the way, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Are you familiar with that, Secretary Austin?
What I am familiar with is that we've given our Inspector General the access that he needs to be able to exercise oversight, and we've just increased his authorization in terms of number of people to have forward there. That's really important. But in terms of specific monies that are being provided to Ukraine, we don't, as you know, Senator, we don't provide money. We provide security assistance in a way of equipment, munitions, and that sort of stuff. And we replenish, when we replenish the things that we've taken out of our own stocks to provide to Ukraine, that work comes through our industrial base. Companies in Alabama are helping to create the weapon systems to replace those systems that we provided to Ukraine. In terms of specific cases that the IG may be referring to, I don't have knowledge of that.
Yeah, I also want to remind you, we are building munitions in our country, and in Alabama we do build quite a few boats, submarines, missiles, and those things. But we do spend a lot of money out of the country on munitions because our industrial base is not near what it used to be. I heard Secretary Blinken say last week in Brussels that Ukraine will soon be in NATO. You agree with that?
That's the goal of the NATO members, is to at some point bring Ukraine into NATO, and that's certainly something that Ukraine wants to see.
If you're Russia, would you want that? I'm just asking. I mean, we're playing playing games with Russia right now. I just want to understand why we would do that.
Certainly, if I was Russia, I would not want that, Senator. I would also not want Finland and Sweden to be a part of NATO, and they are. And the reason that they are is because Putin invaded his neighbor, and without provocation, without justification, and so that's why that's why we are where we are. Instead of making things better for himself, he had the effect of enlarging NATO, which obviously creates worse conditions for him.
Do we have 12 CIA bases in Ukraine? Can you answer that in this setting?
CIA bases? I'll defer
I
that.
got this out of the New York Times, which I don't read very often, but.
I'll defer that question to the director of the CIA, Senator.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So what additional authorities or funding does the Department of Defense need to improve this access to affordable housing and, really importantly, affordable childcare? We're talking about Creech. Those drones go 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They need childcare. And so how do we ensure that our service members can fully focus on their duties?
Regarding housing, as you may have heard me say earlier, Senator, we, in terms of family housing, we're investing, we're asking to invest some $2 billion in this budget, and then $1.1 billion in unaccompanied housing. And it's important to note that $171 million is being carved out for oversight of our housing efforts. So this is very important. We're also, increasing the basic allowance for housing. We've increased the BAH some 20% since 2023, and I think that's material. That's meaningful to our troops, and I go out and talk to them about it, and they really appreciate that. So thanks for your support in that regard. Your comments on child care, I absolutely agree with. Just had our senior enlisted leaders together, and we meet on occasion to talk about what's important to the force. And this is one area that they continue to raise that we need to work together to improve. And we have made some improvements. We have provided additional assistance in terms of with child care fees. We are investing in child care facilities. I think some $4 billion or so that we're asking for new child care facilities. And
your, Mr. Secretary, responsibility to submit a report that prioritizes matters identified as unfunded priorities by the senior military officers of the services and combatant commands. So, Mr. Secretary, is there a reason that you chose not to prioritize the list of unfunded priorities submitted to this committee?
Our most pressing priority currently, Senator, is to try to get the supplemental passed. And if we can get that through, I think that will help us in a number of ways. And so I certainly appreciate the Senate's help in terms of the bill that you passed. And I would hope that we'd see some progress on this going forward. Our commanders are required by law to submit unfunded priority lists. We encourage and require commanders and service chiefs and secretaries to invest in their base budget what's needed to make sure that we can maintain a credible fighting force. And this year we chose to invest in readiness and also in taking care of our people, and that caused us to make sure that I have to make some choices about modernization for the longer term. But those are choices that I think with a higher top line in the future we can certainly recover from.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I want to cut in. You mentioned that it is required by law. That's actually Section 222A of Title 10. And I would just like to point out that it requires rank prioritization, and that was not ranked with priority.
General, how have the multi-year procurements
that we passed out of this committee impacted our munitions stores to date?
Well, they will have an impact. The challenges that came out, the NDA in 24 gave us the multi-year procurement, but we didn't get a budget for 24 until 170 days in. But I do see the opportunity going forward in the future of how multi-year procurement will assist us first to create a constant demand signal to industry, so industry can get facilities, get a workforce, give some consistency, which builds trust, which brings down cost, and then just a steady stream of munitions. And these are the things we need to work on, in addition to getting the budget on time. All those together are going to help us increase our stocks. The last thing I would add to that is, the supplemental that's been talked about several times today. That doesn't only help our partners in Ukraine, it helps to build out a defense industrial base that will help us in the future to make sure we have the capacity and munitions we'll require for any future contingency.
The United States has appropriated $112 billion previously for Ukraine aid, $60 billion in the supplemental that's being considered. Based on this budget, am I to assume then that as of September 30th, there will be no more Ukraine aid from the United States?
This request takes us out through the end of month September.
Right, but there's no money, so I can only be left to assume one of three things. One is the war is over. Two, or B, the United States won't be allocating any more dollars. Or C, that this is a dishonest request. So I guess the question is, are we going to, it's not in this, but we're going to get another supplemental because members of this committee have been told there could be another request for $100 billion. So I guess I'm just trying to understand the totality of the request to the American people for this war that does not seem to be represented in this request.
Well, I assure you that the request is not dishonest, Senator. It's based upon, for this fiscal year, what we see Ukraine needs and our ability to provide security assistance and replenish our stocks. And again, this is not. This goes through our industrial base.
I understand the argument, but I would also make the argument that the weapons that are being procured for Ukraine aren't necessarily the weapons that our industrial base would produce to defend the United States or even in the Indo-Pacific. Those are more long-range fires. That's really not what Ukraine needs. And so with an industrial base that does not have the capacity to do all of these things, we are making decisions about what is produced and what is sold. And those may not be in the interest of the United States. So what does victory look like for Ukraine? Yeah. How do you define victory?
You may have heard me say this earlier, Senator, but we've said from the very beginning that what we want to see is a Ukraine that's a democratic country that has that is independent and has the ability to protect its sovereign territory, to defend its sovereign territory, and to deter aggression.
Does that mean Crimea is part of Ukraine?
Crimea is a part of Ukraine.
Well, okay, right. But in order for the war to be over, does Ukraine have to control Crimea?
In terms of how things transition going forward, I would not want to predict what President Zelensky will decide.
I think part of the problem, with all due respect, is that this administration has not articulated what an exit strategy is. To me, this is a blank check for a war that, without any clearly defined goals, will be endless.
Secretary Austin, I have long been an advocate for strengthening our mill-to-mill partnerships in Southeast Asia. What investments do you plan to make in the fiscal year 25 DoD budget to implement the U.S.-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, and how can Congress help you in that effort?
Well, by the way, I'll see you at the dialogue. As you know, the U.S. Secretary of Defense has supported that every year, and again, I think we've made great progress in strengthening our relationships with partners in the region. In terms of ASEAN, we have continued to develop our relationships with ASEAN members. Every year, we attend the Defense Ministerial meeting, Members Plus, and so I think we've gained a lot of ground in reassuring partners in the region. We also recognize the primacy of ASEAN, and again, I think relationships are as strong as they've ever been, based upon the continued efforts of not only the department but leaders like yourself who continue to go out to the Indo-Pacific. And I suspect you have more than my 9 visits to the Indo-Pacific since you've been in office. But so thank you for everything that you're doing.
So I would appreciate your comments, Mr. Secretary, on how we are going to correct any potential loss of capability, loss of progress in undersea warfare, and the kind of respect from our allies that we need to continue in this area of undersea superiority.
Thanks, Senator. And our undersea supremacy is indeed a strategic advantage that no country in the world can match, and we're going to work to keep it that way. The current issue is one of capacity, and there is a backlog currently in terms of industry's ability to produce submarines on time. So we could increase the backlog, or we could choose to invest in the industrial base to expand capacity so that they can speed production up, and that's what we're doing. In FY23 and 24, we requested some $1.9 billion to invest in the submarine industrial base. In this budget, we're asking you for a total of $4 billion. And in addition to that, the supplemental that we've spoken so much about today includes a $3.3 billion request to also invest in the industrial base.
I'm going to respect the 5-minute rule, even though there's no one to discipline me. And thank you for your testimony on behalf of the committee, and adjourn the committee. Thank you very much.